that PG&E has been allowed to continue operating the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant beyond 2025. One line of thinking, of course, is that we need the plant to remain open. I think anything that is operated by PG&E gives me pause for obvious reasons. If you live in California and you know the history with PG&E. Well, there's someone that's joining us now that knows all too well the history with PG&E, and it is the one and only Loretta Lynch. Loretta, former president of the California Public Utilities Commission. You've been on KGO for many years with Pat Thurston. I am so pleased to finally get you on the Nikki Maduro Show.
Nikki, thank you so much for having me.
All right. I'm so glad to be able to get your insight into this. So I guess I just want to start off with your first reaction to this news.
Well, my first reaction was, there they go again. But digging into it, it's actually not as bad as it could be. Okay. So right now, we have two reactors at that site, and they are licensed to run through mid-2024 and mid-2025. Right now, nothing we can do about that. The decision from the NRC yesterday allows them to run just a little bit longer. Essentially, they can run while the NRC looks at PG&E's new application. And so for practical purposes, I think that's going to mean 6 months to a year longer than they otherwise would. But we want that in one respect, because PG&E was trying to foist off on the NRC their old 2009 application to get a license extension. And the good news is, in January, the NRC said, that is way too old. And by the way, it's way before Fukushima. So you, PG&E, have to submit a brand new application that takes into account all the new safety standards and all the new accidents that have happened since that 2009 application. Then we'll review it. And then yesterday what happened was the NRC said, oh, and by the way, you can keep producing power until we come to a conclusion on this new application, which PG&E hasn't even submitted yet.
I mean, obviously, we haven't seen the application, as you just said. Do you think that PG&E, given its history, would be able to safely operate the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant, given the earthquake concerns, given the age of the power plants?
No, but it's not necessarily what I think. It's what the scientists think, and also what PG&E can prove. So in this little space of time, which is going to be 3 years, not 2 years, pretty much, let them operate and try to prove up their case. And what that does is one good thing for California consumers. If PG&E didn't have this authority, it's actually an exemption from the rule to keep operating while their new application is filed and considered, then California would have to scramble to go find replacement power. So we don't want consumers to have to pay twice. So this authority allows California to count the power that Diablo Canyon will be producing toward our clean energy and our reliability mandates, so that we don't have to overbuy even more, and then California consumers have to pay more and more, even when we have this Diablo Canyon power available.
Loretta Lynch, Senator Dianne Feinstein was quoted in the LA Times as admitting, obviously, she's changed her mind about the Diablo Canyon shutdown. She changed it last year. And she said in a statement, quote, "This decision will allow Diablo Canyon to serve as a bridge to a clean energy future, maintaining a reliable source of carbon-free power as we continue to invest in renewable energy." Do you think that nuclear power has a place, or even a growing place, in our energy plan?
Certainly not a growing place, and eventually I hope not a place whatsoever. There are pros and cons to nuclear power. It is cleaner than coal and natural gas, by far. The problem is it's not that safe, as we all know. So what the NRC and California is doing is they are betting that there's not going to be a major earthquake until they can prove that this plant is safe. And frankly, they're betting that every day, because we know that there have been serious safety problems at Diablo Canyon. We know that, and it's one of the reasons why Diablo Canyon is at the bottom of the list when it comes to nuclear plant reliability nationwide. Most nukes run over 95% of the time because they're properly maintained and somewhat safe. This nuke does not. It runs less than 90% of the time because it's old, creaky, and frankly, so far not very safe. So we're really we're playing Russian roulette with the clock in terms of an earthquake and safety here.
And that obviously makes everybody very concerned. The adjectives you just used are not adjectives I want to describe a nuclear power plant. And I think everybody would agree with me on this. Um, okay, so for a little bit longer, you said 6 months, maybe a year to continue operating. So then that begs the question, Loretta,
is California really going to be able to take this plant or these plants offline and still meet our goal, which Governor Newsom has set to, have zero emission new cars being sold in the state of California? We want more solar panels, obviously, to help offset some of that. But are we making progress, in your opinion, on doing this, given, PG&E is basically a monopoly in the state?
Well, actually, yes, and it depends. So, yes, California policymakers have been planning for the shutdown of Diablo for years. PG&E made a deal with environmentalists and consumer groups in 2016 to shut Diablo down when the license expires in 24 and 25, in part because they knew at that point they couldn't prove to the NRC that they could operate safely enough for a license renewal. After Fukushima, they realized, bets are off. So yes, we've been planning, and there are renewable resources scheduled to come online in 25 and 26 that would more than compensate for the shutdown of Diablo Canyon. But the problem is, the it depends part is, we have been experiencing reliability problems, blackouts and near blackouts, not because we don't have enough power, but because our grid operator is allowing games in our electricity markets and in the grid operation. So the times where we were blacked out in 20 and almost blacked out in 2022, those times were times of the highest exports out of California. So the real problem here is the ISO exists for the sellers and the energy traders and not for Californians. They are not ensuring reliable power. So as long as you allow power to leave California when we need it most, you can never fill the bucket all the way if there's a hole in the bucket. The ISO must stop allowing exports of power outside of California at times of high demand, or at times of any demand if Californians need it. And until they do, we will always have reliability problems with or without Diablo.
I want to welcome Kim McAllister to the show. And Kim, we love having Loretta Lynch on, and I'm
Loretta
so happy to get her on. We've been dying to get you on. And Kim, I don't know if you have any questions, but again, when we're talking about PG&E, Loretta, I wonder how much we can really even trust them, one, on their application and their plan to operate this plant safely. To put it bluntly, and of course, this is my own opinion, they lie. They lie because they didn't do the work. They're up to their eyeballs in lawsuits and payouts. And I don't feel like we could trust them. And yet, obviously, they've been given at least this temporary green light.
Well, you're absolutely right. They lie. And it's not just your opinion. It's the federal court's opinion. They have been convicted of criminal negligence because their criminal negligence has killed people and has injured people over and over. So at this point, they have been convicted of over 100 criminal felonies in the last decade, which I don't think any utility in the country, much less perhaps any company in the country, can meet that record of perfidy. So of course they've lost the benefit of the doubt. And the problem here is the public gets this. We know that they are not to be trusted. The problem is, do the regulators know that they are not to be trusted? Because there's such coziness between the regulators and PG&E that I am concerned that the regulators are not exercising oversight the way they should.
And we have a question from Calvin, one of our viewers, saying, Loretta, how can we get the CPUC to help ratepayers and not PG&E? Do we just fire them all?
Well, sadly, you can't. It's up to the governor and the legislature on that point. But what you can do is make sure that your legislators know that we need PUC commissioners that are for the people and not for PG&E. But it's true. The costs are outrageous right now, and that is both PG&E's fault and the PUC's fault. And we have got to hold the PUC accountable to bring down these outrageously high prices. There are lots of ways to do that. We could talk about that perhaps another time, but it's not being done. And until it happens, until we actually get these rates down, we are endangering the entire California economy.
Yeah.
I mean, the rates are crazy. Go ahead.
It's almost double what it was. I mean, it's unexpected. All of a sudden, you get this $500 or $600 power bill, and you haven't really done anything different. And it's like, oh my God, how am I going to make this work? And it's cold, freezing some nights, especially here in the North Bay. I'm telling my family, sweatshirt up, put on an extra blanket, and bundle yourself, because I'm not cranking up this heat way high. Because you just your blanket.
I have an electric blanket because I'm not turning the
Yeah.
freaking heat on anymore. I mean,
because
it's too
it
much.
is so expensive. And while that's good that we're conserving in some ways, there are some people who, I mean, this really is affecting them.
Hey, I'm from a working class family, and my dad used to always say, turn down the heat and put on a sweater. But at some point, these rates get so high that that's not enough. And the choices that families have to make are heartbreaking. It's pay the PG&E bill or eat, pay the PG&E bill or the rent bill. And frankly, it's not just California families. California businesses have some of the highest rates in the nation, far outstripping inflation. And I'm going to leave you with this little tidbit. Guess what? PG&E is applying for a 23% rate increase this year.
No,
Are you kidding me?
No.
Are they trying to make it so we can't even have power at all?
Yeah.
And the problem here is the cozy co-option between PG&E and the PUC. Just last November, the PUC allowed all the California utilities to keep $500 million in admittedly excess profits. The utility said, hey, we earned more than you told us we could earn, but we'd like to keep that money, thank you, because of the pandemic. And guess what? Against all the evidence, the PUC said, sure, you can keep that money. Think about what $500 million in refunds would mean to Californians right now.
I mean, that just seems like we need to be holding Governor Newsom's feet to the fire to do something about this, Loretta. I mean, Calvin Wong had said, fire them all. I mean, whenever you hear a criticism of Gavin Newsom, it largely comes down to what he's done with with PG&E and the CPUC.
Well, and I worked for another governor, Gray Davis, who was immensely popular until he wasn't. And what brought him down? Too cozy relationship with the California utilities and too slow of an action to curb the profiteering in California's energy markets. We have a clear lesson. I hope the governor does not fall for it again.
So we recently had someone called it a climate reward, but it was a pittance. It was like, I don't know, 50 or 60 bucks, and our power bills are astronomical. What good is a reward if it doesn't even make a dent?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. That is a rebate that is baked into California law that we've been receiving in May or June for the last several years. All the PUC did was a shell game. They moved up giving consumers that rebate now. But then when we switch to summer rates, which by the way are higher, we're not going to have that rebate to cushion that transition. So all they did was rob from Peter to pay Paul. And come May, we're going to have high bills again, and they're not going to have any rebates in their back pocket to give customers.
Lori, one of our viewers has an interesting question. Can consumers start a class action against them? I'm assuming them being either the CPUC or PG&E. I mean, what recourse do we really have? Remind us. I mean, it just seems criminal. I don't know what else to say. We need electricity. We don't have any other options other than PG&E. What can people do besides freeze their butts off?
Well, so here's the deal. You can't start a class action against the PUC because it's a state agency and you can't sue the state. So what do you do? And so then what you have to do is advocate either at the PUC, I have to say rigged jurisdiction there, rigged venue, or you go to our legislators and you say, hey, two things. One, you should remove the limitations on court jurisdiction so that all these other decisions have to be made at the PUC and can't be made by a court. It's called Section 1759, and the utilities use this all the time to kick valid claims out of court and kick them back to the PUC where they either languish or they're summarily dismissed. That's a bad deal. It's been a bad deal for decades. That has to change. But then the second thing is you can't sue the PUC, but what you can do is appeal a PUC decision to appellate court, but in only very narrow ways. The PUC is the only state agency that has these special protections from judicial review, and those got to go because the PUC is never going to change its stripes and never going to become a watchdog instead of a lapdog until a court can review what it does and until victims of PG&E's negligence can get to court.
Why do they have special rules, Loretta? And were we just not paying attention when they snuck all these things into place?
Oh, these special rules were put in by the utilities long ago, like decades ago in the 50s and 60s, because the utilities aren't stupid. They knew that if they could co-opt 3 of the 5 PUC members and then limit court review of the PUC actions, then they were going to be, pigs at the trough, which they are. So they did that really well. And the problem is the utilities have such a hold on the legislature and the governor that those, let's just say, antiquated and certainly not consumer-friendly procedural laws have never been changed.
You just said has such a hold on the governor. I know you can't read his mind, and I bet it's just money. But is there anything else I feel like Governor Newsom can get such gold stars from Californians if he actually did something about this. Why do you think he can't or won't? Is it simply money?
Well, I used to always advise Governor Davis that he was never going to lose an election by siding with the people over the utilities.
Exactly.
And here we are, right? That recall is made him infamous. And ultimately, it's kind of a tipping point kind of thing. People will stand for some co-option and corruption and some inefficiency and too much profiteering, but not a lot. And we are at the point of that tipping point. We are getting gouged by PG&E. We're getting gouged by the energy sellers. The governor's own regulators aren't doing their job, and the governor's own market operators are clearly not doing their job. They answer to the traders, the energy traders, and they really don't like to answer to California. Until we fix those two things, our economy is going to continue to be pillaged unnecessarily, and people are going to experience real hurt.
Great question from Vilma before I let you go, Loretta Lynch. And we want to get you back regularly. So I hope that you're up for that. But the solar fee, the solar panels, remember they were going to take away some of the incentives for people to put them on their homes. What is the latest with that?
Hey, there's a big cliff coming and it's April 15th. If you don't have your solar application in to PG&E and approved or accepted by PG&E by April 15th, you cannot get the solar deal that the current solar customers get. And I know this personally because I'm changing out the solar panels I put on in 2004 to make them stronger so I can make more solar and pay less to PG&E. And guess what? PG&E just rejected my application because they said I don't have a smart meter and I have to have a smart meter to be in the solar program. Well, I'm already in the solar program. I'm just switching out panels that I'm already producing solar. And I said, show me where there's that PUC rule. But they are really going beyond what the PUC is requiring. I think either, let's just say, to mess with me or to mess with all customers who want to go solar so that they have the fewest solar customers and so that they have more customers that they can charge more to. Yeah. It's not in PG&E's interest for their customers to go solar because they make less money.
Mm-hmm. That's wild.
That is just that. Yeah. And there's nothing we can do about that. That April 15th, that is set in stone.
Well, 3 environmental groups have filed an application for the PUC to reconsider its decision about this cliff, the April 15th cliff. And we'll see what happens if the PUC does reconsider its decision. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, they're not going to unless they get some political pressure to do that. But I think their decision was illegal because there's a law on the books that says the PUC must administer the program so that the solar program experiences sustainable growth. And having a cliff where new customers get cut off essentially is not sustainable growth. So they violated the law in essentially bending over backwards for the utilities.
It's so frustrating when you hear the governor say, go solar, buy electric vehicles, and plug them into your electric vehicle chargers with your solar paneled house, and we're going to do all this renewable energy, and then they turn around and they make it harder for people. Yeah. I just, it's very frustrating as a consumer.
It's easy to talk the talk. What we all have to be watching is which politicians walk the walk.